Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth conversation on gender and climate change in Africa. These conversations are hosted by ICCASA, that is Climate Change Adaptation for a Sustainable Africa. ICCASA's vision is to see an unequitable and sustainable African tomorrow, and it engages in deliberate actions to achieve this by doing all the actions, strategies that enhance adaptive capacity and resilience among communities in Africa through a gender transformative and socially inclusive approach, and that promotes a gender responsive climate policy actions and strategies. Dear participants, my name is Miriam Mukoda from Makerere University, a master's degree student of agriculture economics, and I would like to welcome you to participate in this conversation. You are kindly reminded to note that these conversations are always recorded, and right now they are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube channels. We also encourage you to tweet the conversation to benefit from the social media platforms, and I mean a strong presence on those channels. And I ask you to please type your questions and comments in the chat section such that they can always be addressed or you get responses to them. Today's presenter will be Mr. Samson Kidera. He's an assistant director at the Fisheries and Blue Economy, State Department for Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Blue Economy in Kenya. Mr. Kidera will be engaging us on a topic that is looking at the importance of sex disaggregated data for informing climate change policies in Africa. Mr. Kidera has attained a great deal of education, that is postgraduate diploma in biostatistics from Linköpings University in Sweden, a postgraduate diploma in education from Kenyatta University, and another bachelor's degree of science in fisheries from Moi University. He has also trained in monitoring and evaluation and management skills from Kenya School of Government. Prior to his work at the ministry, Mr. Samson worked as a high school teacher in biology and mathematics, and later joined Africa Now as a project officer. So together with Ahadi and Nyamira County, he was also a part of the team that developed the sectorial policy formulation on agriculture that is, and rural development sectorial policies and plans in 2017. He was also a co-author on Aquaculture Journal with ChemFree and State Department for Fisheries, Aquaculture, and the Blue Economy in Kisumu. And I think that was a report for a survey of the status of cage culture in Lake Victoria, Kenya, to inform policy on cage investment in Lake Victoria, 2016 to 2017. I take this opportunity to welcome you, Mr. Kidera, to take through that conversation. You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Madam Miriam Mukoba from the University of Makerere in Uganda. I will take this particular opportunity to welcome all the members who are in this particular conversation on the importance of sex disaggregated data for informing climate change policy in Africa. I will request that we now can display my presentation so that I will start.
Go ahead.
Can I see the display? Can it be projected? Can we share the screen for my presentation so that, thanks a lot.
It's already there, Samson.
Okay. We'll find that there's an ambitious strategy to address climate change worldwide. There is what we call the Sustainable Agenda for 2030. And with this particular Sustainable Agenda 2030, it commits states to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And for all nations, for all people, for all segments of society. And most importantly, this particular ambitious agenda pledges to leave no one behind. And therefore, it is most important that all the segments in the society therefore must get involved. And therefore, it requires the need for having a disaggregated data to understand the process. Now, what do we understand by data? So you find that data is a collection of facts, and they can be in terms of numbers, words, or measurements, or observations. That has been translated into a form that can be processed. And usually we use this particular data to transform and change the face of our world progressively. Therefore, data is the most important information that is also capable of being read by a machine. That is a computer and not necessarily the human beings. And therefore, you find that sex-segregated data are collected and analyzed separately on males and females. And this is typically involve asking the who questions. Can we move to the next slide? What do we consider as gender responsive or gender sensitive indicators? Now, these are indicators that measure gender related changes over time. They can refer to a quantitative or qualitative indicators based on sex disaggregated statistical data on certain policy and strategy. Now, the disaggregated data by sex may try also to classify this in terms of the disability, providing different measures for both men and women or youth, and with consideration of geographical location, consideration of the ethnicity, consideration of age, consideration of other things. Now, can we move on? I think you have just gone back. Yes. So why is data important? So data is a useful information that you collect to support organizational decision-making and strategy formation. And data will be presented in different ways. We have categorical data. I don't want to dwell in this much, but our main interest is on how do we present gender disaggregated data. Can we move on to the next slide? Then we also have a nominal type of values representing disaggregated data with the examples that are given under nominal when you simply ask questions on, for example, are you married? Now this is going to help us know whether you are now a woman or you are still a girl who is under certain age limits. And then they can be represented in different ways by putting yes or no, and this particular yes or no are given some numbers especially to help in analysis. Next. We also have other category of data, the ordinal with ordinal values that represent discrete and ordered units. We move. Now we also have more information about the discrete data, that we speak of discrete data if its values are distinct and separate. We move on to the next. We also have sets of continuous data, maybe giving some explanation about a sex disaggregated data in terms of certain indicators. Now, under continuous data, then they represent measurements, and therefore their values can't be counted, but they can be measured. Next. We also have numerical data that comes in form of ratios. So these are values, also ordered units that have the same differences, having some interval values with difference that do not have an absolute zero. For examples, now when we have a disaggregated data of male and females, and then we want to get their distribution in terms of heights, weights, or length, then affecting on their general influence on agricultural sector, then we can use such kind of data, and therefore we must know the meaning. Next. Now that is a diagrammatic representation and categorization of the types of data that will be generated from this disaggregated data. Then we have data with the categorical and numerical. Next slide, please. Now, why are data important? Data is important concept, especially in statistical methods, can only be used with certain data types. So we have to understand the kind of data that we have. You have to analyze continuous data differently than categorical data. That is the thing which I wanted to bring on board. Can we move to the next? Now, the most important gender disaggregated data is that, one, it improves people's lives. This data will help you to improve quality of life. For example, you support improving quality is first and foremost among the reasons why organizations will be using data, by allowing us to understand or measure or take certain actions. When we get the disaggregated data and we have it analyzed, then it is going to help us to inform decisions, because we know that data is equivalent to knowledge. And once we are rich in knowledge, especially in data which is related to sex and how this particular population is involved in maybe agricultural activities, then we will be able to understand, to inform the decisions, to make policies or to come up with strategies. Correct? Next. Can we move to the next? Good. Now, a good informed data will also allow us to monitor the health of an important system. Now, what I mean by health is the progress. Is it positively involved in the process of actually observing what is going on? Now, utilizing data for quality monitoring, organizations are able to respond to challenges before they become full-blown crisis. And that's why we say we can use such kind of data to stop molehills from turning into mountain hills. So effective quality monitoring will allow your organization to be proactive rather than reactive in terms of giving responses to the situations in a given area. We move on. Okay. This is self-explanatory, allow organization to measure the effectiveness of a given decision or strategy. We proceed. Number five, find solutions to gender problems in agriculture. So that allows organization to visualize relationship Number 6, back up your arguments. Number 7, it helps us to stop the guessing game or actions. Number 8, that it helps us to be strategic in the approaches that we have. Number 9, it helps us know what we are doing well, especially with the gender inclusivity mind. Number 10, it helps us keep track of it all, or inclusivity actions. Number 11, it makes most of your investment or resources mobilized accordingly with the gender lens in mind. Number 12 is that it helps access the resources we have around, so that you have an organization may probably already has most of the data and expertise you needed to begin analysis and the rest. Now we move on. Next slide, please. So why the efforts in gender disaggregated data? Now we have gender disaggregated data can be subcategorized into typical binary, a distinction of male and female, which I've explained. Then this kind of data usually helps in gender policy markers, which indicate the extent to which gender equitable considerations are made to design and implement projects. Next. The efforts in gender disaggregated data also help in gender sector markers, which denotes projects that specifically target increased gender equity and or empowerment as a primary outcome. Because we know different types of gender data are used differently. Now this therefore will help increase transparency of each type with impact progress towards equality differently in climate change programs stroke actions. The next slide. So why the efforts now? More gender disaggregated data promotes gender equity, that I've said, and more gender policy markers holds actors accountable to gender sensitive strategies by highlighting where and how gender considerations are incorporated into climate change. And then JSM also enable monitoring and targeting of gender equity focused outcomes for organizations and for financing. Next slide. Now, what are our achievements in gender stroke sex disaggregated data? Now, we know that research exists on gender disaggregated data in Sustainable Development Goal reporting, and therefore government statistical systems are there also, and therefore there also exist administrative data systems in the same. Next slide. But with those ones said, we have a number of challenges in using gender disaggregated data, because there is little discussion on comprehensive gender disaggregated M&E data to track outcomes of development and humanitarian programs for women and girls. Further, while gender markers evaluate the extent to which programming contributes to gender equity, there is little consensus on which marker is best in terms of methodological rigor or utility for learning and adaptation. Next slide. Monitoring and evaluation as high cost dimensions, this is we know. And you find that when collecting quality gender sex disaggregated data across such a wide number of indicators, it has high cost implications or considerations. So therefore, there will also be challenge in capacity to collect, analyze, disseminate, and act on such data. And so you find that there is inadequate resources. So fewer than a half, this is most important, that fewer than a half of the all developing countries have sex disaggregated data or information in various sectors. So you find that there is a lot of we have a number of our developing countries not actually collecting the gender disaggregated data because of the high cost involved and lack of capacity in terms of the skills that are involved and the type of equipment that are also required. Next slide. So next slide, yeah. So now one of the way forward is that there is need to consider outcome document of Addis Ababa action agenda, which noted that high quality disaggregated data as an essential input for smart and transparent decision making. And it also noted that a focus on a quantitative and qualitative data systems nationally and subnationally. Now, this particular, systems will strengthen domestic capacity, transparency and accountability in the continental and global partnerships for policy developments. So there is need for gender indicators and sex disaggregated data, which is highly recognized. So the big question is, do we as African society have adequate resources, time, finances, human capital, equipment to achieve this? Now the requirement is that we must develop agile policies that are enable us in this particular discourse. We move on. Now, continued partnership with the development initiative, therefore, is required to help review available gender markers and assess their utility for learning and data-driven decision-making and policy strategy. So it is found that Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, gender quality policy markers is best to advance transparency and accountability towards gender equity commitments. However, it is a three-tiered self-reported evaluation is not rigorous enough, and is one of the misgivings that we have for the level of detail or rigor required for improving outcomes for women and girls. There is also the Interagency Standing Committee. Genders with the age marker is much better suited for learning and decision making, but uptake has been slow and completion requires strong initiative from both project officers and program managers, especially in developing adequate policies for the same. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so both gender markers require gender disaggregated data, which I've said. Therefore, without accurate, timely, and high quality gender disaggregated data, therefore, is no basis for evaluating gender policy markers. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so in achieving more and better gender disaggregated data, we must go further than simply disaggregating beneficiaries by gender or evaluating the effects of programming on men versus women. So there are many other opportunities where gender data can facilitate more meaningful analysis. Yeah, so thanks a lot for that. Therefore, I will advise, I will
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Kidera, for that wonderful presentation. As a reminder, please write your questions or comments in the chat box, and we shall respond to them via email. We've now moved into that part of discussing the issues surrounding the topic that Mr. Kidera has just presented, that is the importance of disaggregated data in climate change, like Hello. Yeah, sorry about that interruption. So I'm welcoming you to discuss the aspects surrounding the issues of disaggregated data, its importance in formulating policy surrounding climate change. So Please, everyone will be allowed only 1 minute in the interest of time. And if you're ready to speak, just raise your hand or just write your question in the chat box. Thank you very much. We have okay. All right, here. Yeah. I welcome you, Mr. Emmanuel Masava, to present your case, please.
Okay, thank you for welcoming me. My name is Emmanuel Mataba. I just want to emphasize the importance of data when it comes to formulation of policies, and encourage organizations organizations dealing with this kind of data or big data not to stop there and just go ahead and develop policy plans, drafts, and share with the relevant institutions for implementation and also for future planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel. David Sekamati, please, it's your turn.
Thank you so much. I want to appreciate the presenter, Dr. Kidera, for that wonderful presentation that he has made. I'm David Sekamati from Uganda, and this is my second time to participate in the conversations. Gender disaggregated data is really very, very important, especially in policy making, but also in other decisions at different levels, as the presentation has highlighted. My only question, and it's a question for us to think about, is do the policymakers understand how important it is to base their decisions on gender disaggregated data? Quite often the technical people will do quite great work. They disaggregated the data. They came up with all these wonderful things. But the policy climate in many of our African countries, and I will give an example in Uganda here because I've been engaging with many policymakers, is that quite often policy is kind of driven by politics and the political agenda, and whether the policy can bring on board more votes. And therefore, that's a challenge that we people in academia and also possibly people in practice need to actually think about. So the question I would be asking my colleague is, how do we ensure that the policymakers appreciate this, for them to be able to make sure that they can be able to engage each other to ensure that the policies are not gender blind based on evidence that is there? How do we engage policymakers to appreciate gender aggregated data and information on which they will be able to base to be able to make policies that actually can benefit both men and women? And maybe I would want him to share with us best practices. These are guys who are very either busy or but what's the best way to be able to engage them to appreciate this, so that as they advance policy, then they can be able to look at both women and men in whatever they are doing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. David. That was a wonderful comment and a suggestion if we are to engage on a gender responsive platform that is proactive. So I would like to give the chance to Dr. Mary Nyasimi. It's your turn, Mary.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Kidera, for such a wonderful presentation about the importance of sex desegregated data. My concern is actually about the nationally determined contribution. Most of them do not even address the issue of gender equality and social inclusion, and neither do they even use sex desegregated data as in the background or the preamble of the NDCs. Most of the NDCs just give the, the impacts of climate change in the countries, the projections of the increase in temperatures and rainfall amounts and all that. But hardly does the preamble actually give us the differentiation impacts on men, women, people living with disabilities, children, the youth, all those social differentiations. So this might present a challenge for most of the countries that will be implementing some of the adaptation and mitigation actions if there is no gender lens in those NDCs. So maybe as countries, I'm sure some of them are revising their NDCs. That is something we need to keep in mind to ensure that we have disaggregated data for all these social categories of people, and as well as all the adaptation action and mitigation actions are actually directed specific to different social groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for that input. I would like to welcome Duncan Ocheng to present his comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Sam Kidera for the wonderful presentation he has given unto us. My worry with this gender disaggregated data is that we Africans, we have a staunch culture on these gender issues. And when it comes to things like land ownership or even the roles, now how do the policymakers intend to put this into the table and consider all this for a smooth run of gender disaggregated data? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to know if Mr. Kidera would like to maybe answer some of the questions or just make more comments, or we can just present all the questions, then you'll be able to answer at the end.
Okay, thanks a lot, Miriam. For Dr. Mary, on nationally determined contribution, you find that some of the data that come, especially on mitigation, we know that the main contributors of greenhouse gases emissions come from stock production areas. So at the same time, in the fishery subsector, you find that the use of fuel for petrol, for energy, that is involved. And you find that in the fishery subsector, the people who are going into the fishing expedition are usually classified as especially the male youths or the male adults, and they are the people who are mostly involved. So you find that such kind of categorization is not yet done because they were undefined before. So this is a new, these are some of the efforts that we must come on board with, so that we develop policies or regulation that is going to help us guide this, so that the final data that comes out reflects on that kind of gender categorization in terms of mitigation measures or adaptation measures. Now, on Duncan Ochieng, you find that it is one of the commitments that each and every country should come with the legislations that is going to lower gender disparity and enhance gender parity. Especially, for example, in Kenya, we have laws that allows both the male and females or women to be registered and to inherit maybe parcels of land the same way the male also inherit this particular parcels of land from their parents. So you find that enforcing such kind of regulations perhaps may also require a lot of some efforts, but you find that most of these particular countries are trying to enhance this in ensuring that there is some level of gender parity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Kidera, again for that input. I would like to give Mr. Masaba the chance to speak again. Mr. Masaba, please go ahead and present your comment.
Sorry, I didn't realize my hand was raised.
Oh.
But just to, now that I have a chance, there was a question on how to ensure that maybe this data is put into use by the relevant policymakers. I will take an example of a country like Kenya, where all decisions or everything that is done at any level depends on policy, relevant policies, or is controlled by policies. So it is important as maybe academia people or scientists, maybe we should go ahead and after working on this kind of working with the data, we can also go ahead and develop drafts or policy drafts, then maybe share with the relevant authorities or decision makers to maybe make them policy. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, just to come on, especially for the Masaba, you find that academia and other organizations have been working in silos, and to break this particular bottleneck, then you remember there are recommendations from the Paris Agreement of 2015 on climate change that there will to enhance implementation, especially on the commitments, then there should be the platforms that are formed. For example, this kind of discussion is going to influence, because the discussion is helping us to interact with the different players in this particular field. So you find, for example, in Kenya, we have the multi-stakeholder platforms at both the national and the lower level of government, which is bringing different players together. So when these kind of interactions come on board, then it is going to have relevant people and or have relevant institutions that is going to that are going to help in coming up with appropriate policies that is going to influence this kind of development.
Very much, Mr. Kidera again. I would like, in the interest of time, I would like to thank you everyone for having attended this conversation, the fifth one. This conversation will be uploaded on the ICCASA website. That's the Facebook page and the YouTube channel. We are all encouraged to continue participating in these conversations. Our next conversation will be on the 3rd of August, and it will still start at 3 p.m. Kenyan time. And we will have the pleasure of hearing from Mr. Demisola Akosa from the Center of the 21st Century Issues based in Nigeria. She will engage us in discussing the topic, amplifying African women's voices in climate finance and the Green Climate Fund. Thank you very much. I encourage you to, if you're interested in being a guest speaker, please go through the website, send an email to the ICCASA official email address, and we'll let you know. We'll come back to you and let you know when you can be scheduled to speak. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you that day on the 3rd of August. And now I think the meeting is closed. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
God bless. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.